Welcome to the Red Letter Disciple. My name is Zach Zender. I'm going to be joined in just a couple of minutes by my co-host, Chris Johnson. And we hope that this podcast challenges you to become a greater follower of Jesus, because we believe that when we can together unleash a greater, fuller, and truer expression of Jesus, like the world is going to change. And so here's what's going to happen. You're going to be challenged, you're going to be inspired, and you're going to have a lot of laughs along the way with us on our podcast. Season 1 is off to an awesome start. In just a few weeks, you guys have helped us get to more than 100 reviews on Apple Podcasts. And so we are so grateful for our listeners. Your support and your reviews are going to help us to create more podcasts in the future. Schultz MC said, as a Jesus follower, this is the kind of encouragement I need, filled with joy, hope, humor, and challenge. Come on, Schultz MC. That's beautiful. So, hey, can you continue to spread the word? If this podcast is helpful for you or you believe it'll be helpful for someone else, we are asking, could you give us a 5-star review on your favorite streaming platform? You can find out which platforms we're on, access our show notes for today, check in with our sponsor there, and listen to past episodes on our website, redletterpodcast.com. So on the podcast today, we have Peter McGowan with us. Peter is the president and co-founder of Plain Joe Studios, and he is known as the chief storyteller. And with that title, I'm really excited to ask Peter, how followers of Jesus can tell a better story of who Jesus is, how individuals and churches can collectively tell a better story. So we're going to find out, in Peter's words, how businesses like Disney and individuals like Elon Musk can actually help us tell the story of Jesus to this world. So I can't wait for you to meet Peter. He is maybe the smartest guy I know. But before we meet Peter, I want to introduce you to Phil Ling. Phil is the founder and leader of The Giving Church, our season 1 sponsor here at the Red Letter Disciple podcast. The Giving Church, through Phil's leadership, has helped more than 1,000 churches raise more than $1 billion. That's incredible. They help bring kingdom dreams to fruition and are here to help any church grow in their generosity. And so over the next few episodes, I get to ask this incredible leader a few questions about giving related to the church. And so today, Phil, I want to ask you, as a pastor or church leader, I know that I'm often looking at our church offerings and looking at our budgets. But I want to know from you, what are the numbers, or what's the one number I should be looking for when I'm looking at my church offerings and budgets?
I'm going to give you 2 numbers because, I'm a preacher. You got to get more than one thing. But if I had 3, it'd have a sad story. 2 is the churn rate. What's your churn rate? The average church in America, if you look to see who gives them money, 18 to 20% of them move away the next year and are replaced by somebody else. So that's a churn rate. Are you high or low on that? Participation is how many people in my church give over $200 in a year. That's kind of the level. The average church, 45% give less than $200 in a year. So look at yours and say, where am I? Am I average in there? Am I churn rate? Am I participation number?
Awesome. And here's what's great. You guys commissioned a study that had thousands of churches participate, and were able to find those numbers, because I know when I'm looking at offerings and budgets, I'm really good at looking at the bottom line and just looking at numbers. But what you're telling me too is don't just look at numbers, look at people in there, look at who's giving, who's not giving, and comparatively see where you're at with those things. And so I think that's awesome. Churn rate. And then I'm always that, since the first time I heard it from you a few weeks ago, that 45% number, I'm thinking, man, there's so much potential if we can get this right. And so if you want more things like that, more statistics, data, and just expertise, The Giving Church offers that and more. Go to thegivingchurch.com/red, and they've got a free PDF there that some of this research comes from. It's called 5 Ways to Grow Your Church's Giving. What pastor doesn't want to do that? And so come on, go over to thegivingchurch.com/red to download that free PDF. But we are now on to episode 5. Let's do this. Excited for today's show, today's podcast. I got one of my favorite people on with me. His name is Peter McGowan. And so Peter is one of the founders of Plain Joe and Storyland Studios. Peter's unique because he brings clients' unique stories to life by broadening their visual vocabulary beyond words. He is what's known as the two words, the chief storyteller. And so welcome, Peter, to the Red Letter Disciple podcast. There you go. Peter, on your bio as well, it says you've worked with nonprofits, churches, as well as larger scale corporate clients, Infinity, Nissan, IBM, Johnson & Johnson, Disney, Universal,
whoa.
Lego.
You've worked with Marvel?
It's great, but I've done some work with Marvel.
Okay, so here's
not in the feature film stuff.
Oh, okay. Well, here I have an idea real quick, and this isn't maybe part of the podcast. Peter, next time you talk to Marvel, I have been really kind of scripting this idea for a middle age. He's 48 years old. He's a little bit overweight, but he's a superhero, right?
With red sequins?
Yes. And this is his suit. He puts on the red suit, and he is indestructible. He can shoot fireballs. He can fly through the sky like this, like green screen me right now. Look, whoa. So next time, Peter, if you don't mind, when you're talking to those guys, just,
I'm sure that'll be first on his list. But
right.
Hey, I'm excited to have you here. Peter, you are such an important piece of my story. And honestly, I don't know that we'd be even having a podcast called Red Letter Disciple today without you. You were at a time when I had reached out to a few people about the idea initially behind Red Letter Challenge. You were one of the people that believed in it. And I needed somebody at that time to say, I believe in this. And the more we got to know each other and sync up, I think we realized how similar we were of like, we need to tell a better story of who Jesus is. And so truly, man, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for coming at a beautiful time, at a time when I needed you to help. And it's been cool to see what God's done since then. So.
All right, Peter, great podcast. Thanks, man.
Yeah, humbled and blessed by that, bro.
Yeah, no, it's great, dude. All right. So Peter, I want to hear your story though, right? I want to hear your story, like your faith journey and how you got to the place where you are today of leading these really two incredible studios.
Man, that's kind of I'm not sure how deep you really want me to go, but I'll give you the condensed version. But basically, grew up as an Army brat. My dad was traveling a lot. I spent the first decade of my life overseas, mainly in Europe, Germany. Landed in California in 1984. I was 12 years old, and my dad left us. And so left us a single mom doing her best to raise three boys, 12, 14, 16. And praise God, we kind of got adopted into a local church. And that church just changed the trajectory of my life. And I can kind of do a deeper dive of my dad some other time, but he wasn't a good guy. He was actually kind of we joke around. We say, if you ever saw Catch Me If You Can, we're like, that could have been my dad. He was like a professional con man. He would, we grew up learning it was totally okay to lie, cheat, and steal. If you get caught, just run away. And really what was remarkable was God put incredible men around my life that taught me what it was to be a godly man, to what it is to chase after Jesus' heart, what it is to be a godly husband, and what do I want to be there, a godly father, and then ultimately a godly business owner. And what does that reflection of Christ look like as I move forward? So, but in that journey, one of those men, this guy Doug Husen, gave me my very first job of all places at IBM. And doing IT work, and in '91, IT was a good place to be. It was like the whole start of the internet, and he set me in a direction of rather than going out and spending the money I was making on a new car, or any of those things, he got me into investing. And the next decade of my life would just go really well, but primarily in the IT world. Yeah. And but my niche was networking Macs and PCs for ad agencies, service bureaus, training companies. But I did contract work for companies like Disney. Okay. And it was actually October of 2001, just after 9/11, that a couple I went to coffee with Mike Foster, a really good friend. I kind of grew up with him from junior high. He's one of those guys. We used to go to summer camp together. He was a camp counselor. And then my big brother, Mel, who actually led me to the Lord, we were sitting in a coffee shop one night. And Mike just asked this question. He's like, why is it that if we tell the server right now that we're Christians, unless they're a believer, the first thought in their head will have nothing to do with who Jesus is. It's going to be like, great, cheap tip, homophobic, judgmental, hypocritical. And I remember just sitting there going like, yeah, dude, why is that? And Mel was like, man, it's because the church has forgotten how to tell its story. And we're like, what are you talking about? The church tells its story every Sunday. And Mel was just like, nah, man, it's like Walt Disney had this idea that everything speaks. And really, story is not just an oral or written tradition. It really is this broader vocabulary of design and interaction. So that night we were just talking about it and we're like, man, how can we help the church tell its story better? And we came out with this idea that, we're just going to start a little side studio, and the idea is we're going to bring on some interns and send them out into other churches and help try and influence the way that they think of basically, what we call experience design. But it's three main areas. What we say, story that walks away with people, or traditionally people will say it's the brand. But for us, it's not about logos, fonts, and colors. It's an emotional response. How do you feel when you say Red Letter Challenge? How do you feel when you say Disney, Apple, Nike, Tesla? That emotional response is what we are intentional about. Then the second area is story that doesn't walk away with people. Okay. We call it spatial storytelling. And over the last 20 years, we've become licensed architects, interior designers, landscapers. But what is it that when people walk into story and it creates a sense of place, does it back that story up? And then the third area is story that people actually interact with. Okay. And that gets into web development, app development, but really even culture development, because it's all about the interactivity of the brand, how you go back and forth. And when we talk about, anyways, I digress on that. But but that's what we started the studio around. And that was in October of 2001. Great time to start a business right after 9/11. It was this calling. It was like, we got to do something. And it was a low budget operation in the beginning. And I think that bootstrapping is something for the last 20 years I've always hung on to. It's like, okay, we can go do work. I remember early days, we got a $20 million contract in Las Vegas for the Tropicana Hotel. We did this killer experience. Yeah. And then we had a local kids pastor in Las Vegas. He's like, can I do something like that? But I only have 20,000. But the idea was, how do you take an idea, a story, and then bring it all the way down in budget? Yeah. And, one of my Marvel movies, in the beginning of Ant-Man 2, I think it is, he's like, crawling around in the caves, kind of things going to attack him. And then they pull back and he's in cardboard boxes. And that's the thing is it's about the story, not so much how you pull it off. And you can use high budgets and pull all this stuff off. But man, it's amazing the power of a book where it's just your imagination and how you lead people through that versus spending $100 million on special visual effects. Yeah. It can actually be more powerful, just the spoken word or the written word at times. So anyways.
So boy, that's a lot to unpack right there, Peter. But the thing that shocks me is I know a lot of people in IT. I know a lot of people. They are not, and excuse me, the best storytellers on planet Earth.
You just crushed our whole IT audience.
I'm saying that is something like right there. You're doing IT for IBM, and now you're a chief storyteller. I think you're one of maybe 3 on planet Earth that started as an IT guy.
That's awesome.
Man, I don't know. I didn't say I was a good IT guy. No, I'm just kidding.
That's really good. That's really good. And I think that's part of it, though. As we get involved in these things, we figure out a little more of who we are and things become clearer. And what I love about you is, hey, we want to start this thing on the side and just see what happens. And yet you see God moving in that and you step more fully into that and you realize, man, this is so unique and amazing that I'm wired in the same way in which God is leading me, and you just follow his lead and you see what God does. And you've done awesome at that. So when it comes to telling stories, you can take this from an individual scale or a corporate church scale. What are ways that we tell stories wrong or incorrectly? What are a couple things that we do that maybe just we need to be careful of?
Like Blair Witch Project, the shaky cam. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things. And I would even just the segue back from why I did well in IT. It was literally story. And I did really well connecting executive leadership, C-suite leadership with lower IT managers because they didn't understand the story. The IT managers were consumed with a checklist and the process and all these things. They didn't care about how it actually affected the bigger picture, key performance indicators, or any of those things. And it really was connecting the story in middle management that I excelled at. And I actually, went from a system analyst all the way up just because I would connect things with story with people. and help them have empathy for one another. That really was kind of the trick I would use pretty early on.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I love that.
Yeah. So when it comes to storytelling, though, and I think, have you ever heard of the theory of the suspension of disbelief?
So wait a second. Let me work this through. University of Iowa film and TV grad. Suspension of disbelief is we are putting people, or we're creating an environment where people can just forget about everything in their life and experience the joy or the suspense of the next 2 hours.
Yep. Even though rationally they know there's no such thing as sound in outer space, they suspend disbelief to get enraptured into the story, right?
Yes.
My point of contention is beyond that, the greatest storyteller of all time, right? God in human form came to this earth. And I believe the suspension of disbelief is what made him a powerful storyteller. The idea that you would suspend disbelief and make a decision of faith is really what we strive after. So when we work with churches and they're talking about Sunday morning experiences and all this stuff, whatever, and they strive for excellence because our God is worthy of excellence, it really doesn't fly well with me, because I'm like, how does the widow's mite kind of go with that? It's like, I think God cares about what is in our heart. The reason why we strive for excellence is actually to pursue the suspension of disbelief, because we don't want people taken out of the story. We want them to get enraptured in the story. If you say you're a caring church or anywhere is involved, like, what are the elements of the story in the environment, in the interactions, in the brand that help continue that? But you're spot on. And Hollywood is really good at bringing it in just for film. But when we look at life and how we look at, story is not some new marketing buzzword we just came up with. Throughout human history, it's been led by the storytellers. The chieftains around a campfire circle. You look at the leaders, their ability to cast vision and lead. You look at greatest leaders of our time, whether it's like Abraham Lincoln or was it Martin Luther King. They were fantastic storytellers. One of my heroes, Ronald Reagan, and he would just whip out these witty stories and jokes and everything like that, and they would just take you in, and you believe him. And I think so much of humanity has led that. And even if we bring it to a personal level within our own families, I know that really what matters between me and my kids, it's the stories that they tell. It's the stories that they tell of our family vacations, our interactions. When I blew it and went the wrong direction, they like to share the stories about how I don't know where I'm going. Right. But ultimately, even when we're raising the next generation, how is that story connecting? That's really what's kind of really deeply personal to me.
I love that.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So you mentioned obviously God himself, especially the human form of Jesus, like the greatest storyteller of all time. Who today can Christians in the church learn from? Or maybe there is a church or a Christian that is included in this, but who do you feel like are a couple of the really great storytellers that we can be learning from?
Yeah. So I have a whole kind of little sacrilegious, heretical philosophy about this, but
there you go. Good. Bring on.
Really, if we go back around to Jesus, right, and just even his ability, recognizing that the creator of the universe comes to this earth, he has access to it. He's an educated man. He could have written the whole New Testament. Instead, the only thing he ever writes down is temporary and dirt. And I believe there is this disconnect from technology. That is not that technology is bad, but the story is independent of it. And I think when you look at the early church and how the church grew, and even how the early church embraced technology, whether it was the Roman roads, and you look at the gospel going out, when you look at the Gutenberg press, stained glass windows, how do you communicate the gospel to an illiterate society? Looking at when radio came out, Amy Semple McPherson's leveraging of radio to help grow the Foursquare denomination. Even today, the largest privately owned television network, I believe, is TBN. There was a huge leveraging of that. One of my favorite stories, actually, Dan Cathy was sharing with me that when he had a chance. Do you guys know the story of it was called Pinewood, Atlanta, and then now it's called Trilith Studios? So they're coming through, meeting with Dan. He's showing them some different locations. Then they share their origin story, and they're like, "Yeah, it's like their grandfather, J. Arthur Rank, actually was sent by his dad, who owned Pinewood was a lumber mill during the Great Depression." And he sent his father his father sent him out to the U.S. to look for opportunities. He landed in California, and basically landed in Hollywood and saw these people. And there's other stories about Angela's Temple and Amy Semple McPherson doing her illustrated sermons. And in the audience would be like the Marx Brothers and all these like Charlie Chaplin, all these Hollywood people getting ideas from her illustrated sermons to make film with.
Wow.
The use of technology and the use of film for the gospel would advance on. So J. Arthur Rank actually went back to London to start Pinewood Studios as a faith-based mission tool.
Huh.
And they just got sidetracked making secular films.
They just got sidetracked with Star Wars.
Oh man, like as a filmmaker, The Blob, right? The Blob was actually made by Christian filmmakers. It was going to be this Christian allegory. And
no kidding.
And that's what's sad. You look at like even the story of Harry Potter is really kind of heartbreaking because J.K. Rowling, she actually was writing that as a Christian allegory, and when the church asked her, like, hey, is this a Christian allegory? She didn't want to answer them because that would give away the ending.
Right.
Harry's going to die and rise from the dead in the redemption story. Yeah. But her non-answer, they were like, oh, she's from the devil. This is witchcraft. And the church turned on her and she got death threats and all. I feel sorry for her. And then now she's getting beat up by the other communities. You just can't win in this world. But but the idea that
she can rest on her billions of dollars.
It's still hard as a Christian.
No, I hear you, and I'm joking, but that's super tough that you create something as a Christian allegory and you don't want to give it away because it's going to give away the ending, and then you get slammed. And it's right. It feels like at times you can't win either way.
No, and it really caused her to publicly kind of, I don't want to say disown, but she's like, I wouldn't call myself a Christian. And she follows Jesus. She loves him. She's connected with a local church. But the larger church she's disenfranchised from is like what I've read and heard and stuff. But it's really sad. But the idea of like connecting and telling story has been something that the church has used throughout history. And it wasn't until the Industrial Revolution and the idea that the assembly line approach was the most effective and efficient way to do something. And we silo things into these departments and we streamline it. But the whole idea of a church being used one day a week, you batch kids by age group, put them into Sunday school classes, into junior high groups, high school groups. That pastor who baptizes, marries, and buries the people, that's only like 150 years old. Historically, I mean, the church was kind of the original multinational corporation. The Catholic Church is the largest landholder in the world. And we act like multi-site's new. It's like, that's actually the early church was multi-site. I mean, content syndication literally came, like, that's what the Bible was about. You take content, you reshare the same stories and stuff. And how Jesus was able to take the scriptures. He didn't just stand on the steps of the temple. He actually, added story in the parables to help make it relatable and stuff. But historically, the church has done that. But in the last 100 years, the church kind of hit pause on the perfect church model. And from what I know, since the Industrial Revolution, not a single assembly line has gone unpunished. I mean, irrelevance is a big eye opener. And when you look at the American steel industry, railroad industry, now the automotive industry, telecom industry, you name it, education industry, they've all suffered from innovation and the lack thereof. And I think right now, when we'll talk a little bit later, but the idea that the church is just this building that meets on a Sunday morning, COVID was a big wake up call to a lot of people. And I feel bad because I know a lot of people are like, how do we just go back to the way it was before? I don't know if it will ever go back, because I know so many people that have just realized that, hey, on a Sunday morning, I can still connect with my local community, but now I can watch all these other great pastors and preachers online right here in my living room and follow their podcasts and do all these other great things. But it's broadened our appetite for it. It hasn't actually made it narrower. I mean, it's just like, did Napster end up killing music? Did iTunes kill music? And you look at how like Spotify now just dominates. And, just in the last week, Twitter, what's gone on with that and Elon Musk and stuff. But when we look at modern day storytellers, a lot of them have broken out of that convention. Walt Disney, he was a high school dropout. He actually wrote a scathing letter to his high school principal how they were killing creativity by creating clerks through rote memorization. And he understood that. But you even fast forward, we call them natural branders now, but you fast forward, Steve Jobs. One of my favorite stories is about Steve Jobs is the whole innovation of the iPhone. And in his mind, he told a story. He's like, someone's able to answer the phone, then they're able to make a note, then they're able to type an email, then look something up, and then get map directions. And in that story, you did not need a keyboard and you did not need a 10 key or a full QWERTY keyboard. And he let the story drive it. But no survey, no study, no process. In fact, the opposite was true. Motorola, Qualcomm, Nokia, they were all like, every survey we do, everyone's asking for a full keyboard.
Yeah.
Your iPhone's never going to take off. And it's just like, yeah.
Didn't he say something like, we need to tell the people what they want and we need to create that story as opposed to them telling? They don't know what they want. I remember one time he said that.
Yeah.
They don't know what they want.
Yeah, human nature, it's like our founding fathers. They knew democracy didn't work. That's why we have a republic. It's 60% of people resist change no matter what. And it's like, how do you cast vision? How do you actually lead things through? And honestly, it's through story. So today, I would say probably one of the most influential storytellers, whether they realize it or not, is Elon Musk. And if you look at the Tesla ecosystem, it was not just, hey, we're going to make an electric car. It's like he realized, taking a few steps back, it's like, oh, no, it's the charging network. It's the charging infrastructure. It's the whole thing with, bringing back, it's the service model. What do people hate most about the automotive industry? It's getting their car serviced.
Yeah.
Like, and what's frustrating for him is he was like, wait a second, like we know how to make an efficient hybrid for over 60 years. Diesel locomotives. It's a diesel generator powering AC motors. They've known this. So why would they put crappy DC motors in these cars with batteries that are going to wear out in a few years? It's like, it made no sense.
Right.
So he took that, and he started even that before. When you look at his taking on of traditional banking with, was it PayPal?
PayPal, yeah.
And PayPal revolutionized the idea that you could, I don't know if you remember early e-commerce days. I remember doing an online purchase and I had to fax in my photocopy of my driver's license and all this other stuff.
Are you not still doing that?
I do that.
I get like 3 emails a day that ask for that.
We don't have your fax.
It always feels like it's not a scam, but anyway.
Yeah. So I remember the very first things, and when eBay was using PayPal, I was like, this is amazing, being able to buy it so smoothly. Yeah. So I would lean on Elon Musk as a modern day storyteller.
That's a very creative answer. And
I think that's great. Peter, so much gold in what you've just put out. And I think where we're kindred spirits is my heart breaks for like the story you told about J.K. Rowling that like there are people that, and she's obviously on a big scale, but so many others that have been hurt by the story and the representation of Jesus that they have seen, that they have lived. And we have to do a better job of getting back to the storyteller, getting back to Jesus and realizing each of us plays a part in that. And I love that. And so much, so rich on that. And so, and even the COVID stuff you shared. Yeah. I remember even like I was watching my mom as well. She loves watching the worship leader from Mariners in that chapel. And I'm like, I know that chapel, Peter and Plain Joe and those guys storyline. They did that chapel. And it's just so powerful to, hear story and to worship in these spaces online in our homes.
Yeah.
And so it's a real issue. And I don't want to go back to the way that things were pre-COVID, because it was a broken down shadow at best representation of who Jesus was. And so how can we in our future tell a better story? What would you say to that in our future as we hopefully keep moving forward? What can we do as disciples to tell a better story of who Jesus is?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things. First off, thanks for the plug on working on the Mariners Chapel. I always feel guilty. It's like, even when you mentioned Marvel earlier, I'm a part of a much bigger team and even outside of our company, other partners, other firms that we partner up with, it's much bigger than me. And I like in the Mariners Chapel, I got to speak into a couple of the graphics like inside, and I got to see the designs as they were coming together, but it was a lot of other great people working on that. But it's humbling for me to be able to write on other people's coattails. And when we look at opportunities to tell stories, and if I can encourage people, I think the ability, the great thing about books is it unlocks your mind to fill in gaps. Ultimately, when we talk about story, it's literally characters, plots, and settings, right? And these things that interact and then leave a memory, a lasting impression with something, their perception of it. That's really what we're striving after. The trick is we've brought up a generation of people in this academic rigor of like, oh yeah, this is how you do it. And this is follow these steps and it's going to work for you. And the reality is, if you look how Jesus healed, did Jesus do the same thing every time with every person? Did he get the 12 disciples and put them into a room for 3 years and give them a certificate at the end? And each one of them had their same thing. It's like, that's one of my favorite things about seeing The Chosen and seeing his interaction personally with the individual. And that's the thing, is Jesus is very personal with us, with our personal stories. And I think one of the biggest struggles that we have with when we work with people is they always want to get into that assembly line approach, which is great. Efficiency is great. But you always have to step off the crazy train and say, what is that moment where Mary breaks the alabaster vase and washes Jesus' feet? How do you see the forest from the trees? How do you take, honestly, one of our biggest things is, do you Sabbath? Like, do you take a break? The church is the only organization that I know of, and please correct me if wrong, that does a new content service every week. And it is a hamster wheel that burns them out. I do not know of any other organization that does that. When you look at mass media television, they do these things called seasons, and they have different teams that rotate in and out. They give the people these things called vacations and breaks.
What is this new world you're telling me about?
I think the only people that create new weekly content are the church and the WWE. I think that's it.
Yeah. No, even the WWE, they have teams that rotate and give people time off. But the church, and I've heard of churches doing that before, of having like I hate to call it A team, B team, like B team's not as good, but they leverage things off, and they're healthy churches that actually share the stage. When I hear certain preachers, I won't get into the nuance of names, but I remember there's one megachurch pastor who is only preaching 20 times a year. And I'm like, that is amazing. That is awesome. He actually, in certain levels, has a healthy personal life. Now, the staff and everyone else saw it differently. A lot of people, there were some people like, he's not doing his job. He should be up there 50. My pastor is up there 50 weekends a year. And it's like, at what cost? At what cost to his family? At what cost to his kids? So I think I have a hard time with a lot, and that's a whole slippery slope we can go down. But what breaks my heart is these people who are just on this hamster wheel, recreating new content when they have such great content. And if we look at that content and how do you leverage that content, is really kind of one of the key things. So
it's awesome. Yeah, I saw it was more of an informal poll, but somewhere between 70 and 80% of pastors think they probably have 15 to 25 really great messages in them in a year. I thought that's honest, and it's probably fair. Yeah. And to get off of that hamster wheel where it has to be, and I think COVID taught me that, right? Especially as we're looking at online church and what that means, and still figuring out questions around that. Like, part of my thing is like, content creation is important for the church, but content curation is also important. And there's a lot of people who are experts in a lot of things that I'm not, that probably would tell it to our people even better. It's just a matter of, can we get rid of our systems, maybe our egos a little bit for some of us, and allow that, which is really going to disciple our people the best when they're hearing from the best of the best in each place, to tell better stories.
I'd say I have 3 solid messages a year, and they're the same ones. And so I just hope for new people to come
There you go. I like it.
Yeah, that's better than me. I have 3 messages that a third of them are good.
Hey, you got one.
I love it, dude. You're so on with this, and so
but my big thing is, though, that these guys, just seeing the forest from the trees. It's like being able to bring an outside perspective in. And a lot of that is stepping off the hamster wheel, taking those rests. But wisdom seeks a multitude of counselors. And like, how do you do that? And you're talking about ego. It's like, I talk to these guys and they're like, but I get the energy from the room. I feed, and I'm like, man, I'm not sure that's the Holy Spirit, bro. I'm like, that is, but it's like, what's best for the people, and how do we shepherd that? How do you act? And trust me, I believe in systems. I mean, we have over 100 people in our company now, and we didn't get here without systems. But it's a balancing act. Good design is what we say is good composition, and composition is the balance of chaos and structure. So structure is that IT side of me, right? But it's balanced with this creative side, and the balance of the two is the tension we want to manage and we need to manage. And the biggest thing I've seen for a lot of guys in the church world is they can't see the forest from the trees. How do you step back? How do you step outside and take that? And that's the issue with most organizations that don't bring in outside people. And that's probably a huge plug. But when we look at companies like Apple, or name it, Mars M&Ms, Disney, they use outside organizations for an outside voice for a reason.
Yeah. It's so helpful. Yeah, I love that. Peter, you are a founder and president of two studios, Plain Joe and Storyland. I kind of met you, of course, on more of the Plain Joe. Can you tell me the difference between those two, and what it is that you do, and potentially how, especially in the church world, I'm asking you, like, because you've been a help to me, and you've been a help on the church side to many that I know. I was just in one of the buildings that you guys had designed for a friend of mine. It's like, wow, powerful. So tell me, and I want our audience to know, like, what is Plain Joe, what is Storyland, and how have you helped further the church?
Yeah, so basically it's one company with two front doors, and it's the same team, and the two front doors is basically this is where I could get in trouble. But basically, it's a front door for the faith community. So the church world, over 1,000 churches the last 20 years, they really know us as Plain Joe. And the name comes from the idea it's not about us. It's not about our egos. It's about the everyday average Joe, plain Jane that you want to connect with. And that's our heart, is to serve nonprofits and stuff in there. That workload makes up over half of our workload. Traditionally, I should say, with COVID, everything has really changed, actually. The other front door is called Storyland Studios. And that's the front door that we have for all of our secular clients. So our work with Disney, Universal, Lego, Marvel, Mars Entertainment, like all the guys, like they all go through that front door. And the reason why we have two separate front doors is because we're systemically, no, I'm just kidding. I'm Asian. I'm half Vietnamese. There's a Vietnamese door and there's a all other, no, just kidding. No. We did find that it's Colossians 4:5-6. Conduct yourself with wisdom towards outsiders, letting your speech always be seasoned with salt.
Yeah.
And knowing what struck us is that one of those audiences is allergic to the other, and we didn't want to turn them away or turn them off because of that. So our heart is just to get in and serve and love them. And if they find out about the other door, that's great. Our default front door is actually the bigger front door is Storyland. That's the bigger brand, if you will. That's our default email is Storyland. It confuses the heck out of people though, because they'll go through Plain Joe and then Storyland will reply, and they're like, did we get the right people? We didn't need a roller coaster. I was like, oh
yeah, I love that. And yeah, you got your team, and I get it, it's not all about you, but yeah, your team is awesome. And the bringing the outside counsel to bring your church's mission and vision to reality, to tell that story from the moment somebody like even enters the parking lot to what it's like in those first 7 minutes, which are statistically the most important 7, even before the sermon starts, before the worship. Like, you guys are incredible at that. And so, Peter, I want to fast forward a little bit because when I was first in your studio 4 or 5 years ago now, at this point, you guys were already working on virtual reality stuff. And it was the first time I ever put a virtual reality headset on, and my mind was a little bit blown back then. Things have advanced a little bit more, and I'm guessing they're going to be advancing more and more and more and more by what I'm hearing. So I'd love to hear from you. Like, I feel like the church was really way behind in digital discipleship and ministry and church overall. In COVID brought a lot of us into it, which is good. But I'd love to hear from you, like with VR and Web3 and metaverse, all this stuff going on.
Look at you.
Yeah, right. How can we get prepared or be ready? What is this going to mean for us as disciples and churches?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting time because a lot of times people look at our studio and go, man, you guys do a lot of different things. And they see it as everything is like we have these 3 basically different businesses. And even though that's kind of our philosophy, we try and simplify it for people. The reality is it's one studio. We do one work. And I should also clarify, I mentioned our kingdom work kind of like traditionally is more like it's more clients, but the fewer clients generates way more income on the secular side of things.
Right.
And the secular side of things is really where we cut our teeth and get to, be on the forefront of technology in a lot of different areas. And it's those learnings that we take from that larger side of the business that we then draft and we try to figure out how we can help all these. I mean, literally we'll have $1 million project over here and then 20, $50,000 projects over on the right for the churches. Right. It doesn't make sense business wise. We've had business analysts come in for the last 20 years. They're like, why do you guys keep doing all this nonprofit stuff? Because we're like, I know, but
but I love that though. It's your heart though. And I think I don't want to over overstep that and just miss that like that is an intentional decision for you of we want to be involved in God's expression. And I see it as beautiful stewardship, that there's these things over here that can help the church, and that's amazing that you do that.
Yeah.
So talk more.
Yeah, so that's our heart behind it. But even when we look at how we started the studio, even like we were doing 3D and digital design, because of my IT background, I was always about how do we leverage technology to advance and leapfrog our competitors. That's one of my favorite stories is how did Walt Disney take on Universal after they had hoodwinked them and stolen Oswald the Lucky Rabbit? The thing about that made Mickey Mouse special was Steamboat Willie was the very first cartoon with synchronized audio. And he leveraged technology. And you look at the technology in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and as they continued on the multi-plane camera and all these things, he leveraged technology, helped advance things, just like I believe the church would leverage technology with the Gutenberg press and getting the gospel out. I believe historically the church should leverage technology to get the gospel out. And I think we're tripping over ourselves right now because we're trying to leverage technology to work on something that's advancing and then something that's not like set in stone. If I had to compare like where we're at with VR right now, it's headsets are like the 8-tracks of, it's kind of cool. You can take your music with you now. If you pass a song, you can go all the way around, whatever. For those who are listening who don't know what an 8-track is, I'm sorry. It's my age, but I'm actually much older than I look. At least I hear that. So I try and tell myself. But I totally dated myself there.
That's funny.
But anyways, but the reality is, early in our studio, we were using 3D. We were using, and what we're finding is a convergence. And this convergence is not something that's unique to us at this time. You look at all the great architects. I mean, not all of them, but some of my favorites. Frank Lloyd Wright was not just an architect around the building. He actually was a landscaper. He was a furniture maker. He crafted the whole experience. Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, they were fantastic architects, designers, inventors. They brought this culmination of all these things together. Just like a conductor of an orchestra, he can bring the whole orchestra together to have an amazing symphony. And what our biggest hang up is we see is people want to specialize and just do this one thing. So there are traditional architectural firms that all they focus on is the architecture in the building. And then they'll have a separate landscape architect and landscape architecture, or they'll have a separate, but getting everyone to kind of coalesce and combine it kind of trips over themselves. And especially when you get into newer technologies and augmented reality, virtual reality. Right now we're in a spot where it's coming, whether we like it or not. Yeah. And our ability to tolerate change and progress is what's going to allow us to adapt. And I have a good friend, Bobby Grunwald, is he's been doing amazing at Life Church. And I think he has a new title now. I think he's like CEO of YouVersionBible.com. But before that, and he still is, he carries the innovation title and really is the champion of that. And understanding, I love the story of YouVersion. Originally, he had an initial idea. And I really love his original concept, this idea that, you can have your own personal version. And the way he went about it and everything, it was really kind of cool. It just didn't take off. It was ahead of its time, really. And at the 11th hour, they had this license for a Bible translation. I forget which one it was. It's like, but anyways, and it was like the iPhone came out and you could publish that App Store. So he's just like, hey, let's publish the first Bible. And that was it. And it was just willing to try something and let something fail. Maybe that would fail. Instead, it just took off. And here we are, 500 million downloads later.
Yeah, that's amazing.
The work that they're doing and gearing up for is just amazing. But so many churches I know, they think stewardship is saving everything they have, making every dollar go as far as they can. But man, when I look at the parable of the talents, the guy that saved all his money, it was better that he had never been born. And really, we're called to take risks to have that return on investment. And for us, it's taking a risk in your story, taking a look at what that story is and being intentional about it as you move forward.
Don't bury your money. That's what we've learned today.
I love it. Yeah. That idea of risk and giving it back to God and let's try things. And I think that's coming into the future with open hands. And even if I don't fully understand it, probably getting involved in the conversations before I feel like I need to, and going for a thing or two and seeing what God does, I think is just so cool. Peter, you're awesome. We we always close with this question with our guests. And then Chris has got, it's Plain Joe Studios.
Right.
But we want to know we're going to test your trivia on famous Joes.
That's right.
We want to see if you're the real Joe expert.
Yeah.
But anyway, before we get to that, we ask this question of all our guests. At the end of the day, it's a podcast to challenge people to be greater disciples. And so from your seat, your vantage point, I want to ask you, like, if there's one challenge you could issue to our audience practically that they could do this week to grow and be greater disciples, what would you say?
Oh man, for me, it always starts at your home, and it's a hard one to do, but just asking your kids, like, I mean, honestly, what is their favorite memory, from their, if they're not old enough to ask that, but what are the stories that are being told in your house? That's one of the first things I start with.
Yeah.
I love that. So, okay. So that's the challenge. So ask if you've got kids or someone that's close, what is...
It could be your spouse. It could be your good best friend.
Yeah. What's some of your favorite stories?
Favorite story, favorite memory. All right. If you do that this week, I want to hashtag Red Letter Disciple for the podcast, put it on any socials or in YouTube, drop in the comments. I think that's really great. And then recognizing what about that memory, I think going deeper than, right? Why is that the favorite memory and figuring out that piece of the story? I think that's super cool. So
that's awesome.
All right, Chris.
All right.
I'm always nervous, Peter, turning it over to Chris.
All right. Peter. You're Plain Joe. That's you. Now I'm going to name some famous Joes. Zach, can you put 45 seconds on the clock for me? Put 45 seconds on the clock. For every correct answer you get, I will give a description. Or, Peter, we just met each other. I am also an amazing actor. I might act the part out. I might describe the person, but it's up to you to get it.
As many Joes as possible.
Yeah, we're hoping for the win is 5 Joes.
Okay, there you go. 5 Joes. 5 Joes.
All right. Peter, we are going to name some famous Joes. You are a plain Joe, which just speaks of your humility. Yeah. Right? But these are some famous Joes. You have 45 seconds on the clock. If you can name 5, you will receive 500 points.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of points.
All right. 100 points for each Joe. On your marks, get set, go. I have the #1 podcast in the world.
Joe Rogan.
That's it. Okay, let's see here. I was an American musician, singer, songwriter, lead vocalist of the punk rock band, the Ramones.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Yes, Joey Ramone. All right, here we go. I was Jolton Joe, the Yankee Clipper, famous Yankee, baseball player. Married to Marilyn Monroe. Huh?
Not Joe Jackson.
No.
Married to Marilyn Monroe.
Oh, yeah, I don't remember.
All right, Skip.
Joe DiMaggio.
Oh, yeah, DiMaggio. There we go.
Yeah.
All right. Quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers. He went to Notre Dame.
Montana.
That's it.
5 seconds.
Part of the hit TV show Impractical Jokers. I don't know if he's a part of it anymore.
Joe Pesci, Joe Lawrence.
Joe Pesci?
I don't know.
Joe Gatto.
I just started naming Joe actors.
I know. That's the way to go. Thank you so much. You received 300 points, which who knows by the end of season 1 where that's going to put you.
But get you a red letter challenge.
Yeah, grab yourself a book. There we go.
Peter, you rock, man.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for if people want to know more about you or the studio, where can they visit?
There's a church group, right? Church pastors. Let's go to plainjoestudios.com.
There you go. I love it, man. All right, man. Thank you so much for being with us and being the unique storyteller that you are. You inspired a lot of people today, and it's going to be awesome. So I love you, man.
Thank you so much.
Right. Great connecting.
All right.
Wow. Okay. Seriously, Peter, he might be the smartest guy I've ever met. The dude's brilliant. And I love his take on storytelling. Legitimately, I am so grateful for this man, not only for being a guest on the Red Letter Disciple, but out of the blue, he took a chance on a guy writing about red letters. And so to access the show notes and to connect more with Peter and Plain Joe Studios, go on over to redletterpodcast.com. I'm telling you, they are the premier storytellers when it comes to things as small as books and as big as buildings. And so if that's a need for you, look them up, reach out, and I actually think they're a perfect combo with our sponsor for the first season, The Giving Church. Like, you've got Kingdom Dreams, cool. A group like Plain Joe Studios can help bring life to your vision and picture and image and story to your vision. And the Giving Church then come alongside and help you raise the capital you need. I think it's the all-star combo, all for the glory of Jesus and the church becoming the great storytellers that we are called to be. So remember to not only visit Peter and what they're doing at Plain Joe Studios, but also you can check out our season 1 sponsor at thegivingchurch.com/red. They're going to give a free gift to you that's going to help your church grow in its giving. Next week, I'm excited to keep this thing rolling. We got episode 6 with pastor, author, and college friend Adam Griffin. Hopefully he doesn't get into too much college stories about him and I. We'll see. But hey, Adam has served in youth ministry. He served as a public school teacher alongside of Pastor Matt Chandler with one of their pastors, and now planted his own church from the Village Church. He has now co-authored a book with Matt Chandler called Family Discipleship. And so he's really going to dive deep into helping parents raise great disciples of Jesus. Also, he lives in Texas. And have you noticed everybody in Texas thinks Texas is amazing and everything in Texas is amazing. And so we're finally going to get the verdict on the Whataburger. Is it really all that it's cracked up to be? Adam is not from Texas. He moved there. So now we're going to see if that's a big thing for him or not. So, hey, if you haven't hit yet that follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, do it now. And then magically, somehow, some way, it'll show up on your feed next Tuesday.